Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, I was going to talk about basketball, but I have seen plenty of requests for other stuff. Oh, we got a question here. If you were the OC, how many times do you think percentage wise, if you were the OC, how many times do you think percentage wise, I might need you to clarify that question a little bit. We can talk a little bit about gymnastics today, right now though, because this has been a story that has developed within the day today that is quite interesting to say the least. And so for anybody that somehow has not heard, obviously I would say just this morning, Jamie Pollard announced that they were shutting down the gymnastics program, which he had. Oh, we got to clarify a question before we get into gymnastics. If you're the offense coordinator, how often would you let Jalen Rayner? How many carries would you give him? How often would you let him run? Great question. As far as design runs, a handful a game maybe, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm letting Jalen Rayner use his legs as often as he wants to. I'm not putting any sort of limit on him. This is his last year playing college football. As long as I think he's smart enough to keep himself healthy, I don't see any reason to put any sort of limitations on him as far as how he wants to use his legs, especially in the first year. An offensive line that's going to take time to gel. You let Jalen Rayner do Jalen Rayner things. Let him do anything. Let him do what he wants as far as, taking off and running. Obviously, you want him to throw the football and stay in the pocket and deliver the ball. And actually, I don't even care if he's in the pocket. You want him to throw the football. But if he's got an opportunity to pick up 15 yards, mostly untouched with his legs, go. That's fine. Keep the offense moving, keep the ball moving, keep the chains moving. I'm good with that. I don't feel like you need to put a pitch count on Jalen Rayner at this point in his career. Not the way that you would have Brock Purdy when he was a sophomore, where you need to keep him healthy for a few more years. So, you don't want him just taking tons and tons of shots. But all right. So gymnastics, like I said, earlier today, Jamie Pollard announced that they were shutting down the gymnastics program, which I think had been kind of speculated by a lot of people for the last couple of weeks after really since the day that they announced, that they were going to cancel the rest of the season after they had to meet in Denver. And then right after that, they announced that they were canceling the rest of the season. And since then, that day, Jamie Pollard had said, we decided we can't field the team and all this, whatever, was very vague about reasons. And then I think a lot of people from there, just kind of based on the wording of the letter, kind of speculated that they would just kind of shut the gymnastics program down because there was just not a lot going on. And apparently there was lots of problems. That came to fruition today. And Jamie Pollard put out a video that he spent the first half of it. It was a weird video. And it was a weird video to listen to because sorry, here, just give me 1 second here. I'm updating the show title to capture this. So people aren't confused. Anyway, so the video was a little weird to watch because it started out, the first half of it or so was Jamie Pollard saying it's usually fun to be the athletic director. I've for the most part, I've had lots of fun. I've enjoyed this on all this. And basically it spent the first kind of a 3-minute video. He spent the first minute and a half of it just telling people how sometimes his job sucks, which great, Jamie. You're the only person in the world that has a job that sucks sometimes. We all feel very bad for you. And he said, well, but today's one of those days that my job sucks. And, he said, well, we're deciding to discontinue the gymnastics program. And he kind of went down a laundry list of things where he cited issues that came up. I think it was in 2018 then they brought in, they talked to the school's, athletics council, the lawyers, and had them kind of review things, what was going on. He was very, very vague about a lot, very, very vague about all of this. That he brought in the schools council to do a study just to kind of, I guess, to evaluate the health of the program or something like that, because there was some issues that were interpersonal issues or something that were coming up. And they made changes based on the recommendations from the in-house council. And then a few years ago, some other things happened. They brought in outside counsel who then conducted a study and found a bunch of things that apparently were never resolved or continued to get worse or something. Again, I realize I'm being very vague about this, and that is only because Jamie Pollard gave us little to no explanation about, like, as far as specifics about what happened. And then, that was kind of the whole video basically. And then said, like, well, for this, we felt that it was the right decision for Iowa State to just shut the gymnastics program down. And then that they were going to explore a new women's sport that offered, equal or greater opportunity for women's athletes. And they said that they hadn't looked into that just yet. Everybody is publicly speculating that it will be women's wrestling, because Iowa is one of the few states that has girls high school wrestling. It's immensely popular. So you've got tons of in-state recruiting that you can do. You have a lot of talent in-state that you can pull from. You'll have tons of support. It's wrestling. It's wrestling in Iowa. It's going to do well. You've already got some facilities. You can convert the old gymnastics facility into a new wrestling room for the women's team. It's not a massive startup cost. I think women's wrestling just makes a ton of sense. I've seen flag football floated out there, which I think would be very interesting. I would love to cover, this Voice of College Football channel would cover 2 football teams, which would be really cool. I would be very enthusiastic about covering women's flag football. But that one comes with some other logistical issues, because I believe Nebraska is starting a program, but otherwise the nearest flag football programs, I believe, are Colorado and Purdue Fort Wayne, or Indiana Fort Wayne. I think it's Purdue Fort Wayne. So they just don't have a lot of opponents nearby to play in women's flag football. So we will, we'll see how that comes out. Like I said, my money is on women's wrestling, and I think it just makes too much sense. Beyond that, though, what happened, what has transpired since then, though, is a number of former athletes and coaches posting on social media all day, basically refuting or adding context to everything that Jamie had been saying. Let me pull this up here. I can pull up a couple of these here. A couple posts from former Cyclone athletes. Let me pull this up. So, here we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, so this one's from Haley Young, who I believe was a gymnast at Iowa State. She says, heartbroken, this video is BS. Unreconcilable differences. Give me a break. Hold yourself accountable. Hold your leadership accountable. Hold yourself accountable. The statement is a joke. Unbelievable. Have another here. Samantha Schneider, who I believe is another gymnast at Iowa State. I will apologize. I'm not I'm not super familiar with the now former gymnastics program. Heart is broken. Forever love these girls and every memory that has been made and tear that has been put into this year. Terrible that this is the result of the lack of support from Iowa State's athletic administration. For the last 5 months, we have come forward as a team regarding certain situations and environmental concerns. Nothing has been done to protect us as athletes on this team. The gymnast should not be blamed or be sharing any part of responsibility for this decision being made. Bigger and better things ahead for every girl in this program. And I think where this one really started kind of taking a turn, the athletes chairman is obviously valuable. Ryan Snyder was an assistant on the team this year. He says, sad day for the sport. Shame on that entire ISU athletic department. All you had to do was take accountability for hiring the wrong person, which he's referring to the head coach, who her background was like, she was not a coach before. She was She was a former college gymnast who then worked in auto finance for a while, or like a used car dealership or something like that, but just was like involved in the sport. And then I think she was a gymnastics commentator for a little bit. And then we hired her without any coaching experience, basically. He said, how many athletes, coaches, and parents went to administration and told you about Ashley? You have issues in every sport. It's college athletics. You're dealing with young humans in the most influential part of their lives. The issue recently with gymnastics, you hired a used car salesman to lead a storied Division I program. In what other sport or professional does hiring someone with zero experience make sense? I don't know the validity of all this stuff, but it seems to me everybody that was involved with the program has a different story to tell than what Jamie Pollard gave to us in his video today. Anybody that has, seen me on anything else on any previous streams, you guys are probably aware. I am no fan of Jamie Pollard. I have been very critical of him in the past. I'm not going to use today as an opportunity to light into Jamie, partially because it seems like one or both parties are not telling the full side, are not telling the full story here. I don't believe Jamie. I mean, Jamie's obviously not telling the full story because he cited, you could interpret what he said as essentially throwing everybody else in the program under the bus and, shifting all blame to them. But I'm just curious. I'm not like saying that they're not telling the truth, but I'm curious to hear what the full story is from the gymnasts and the assistant coach's point of view, because they are painting a different picture. They're painting a picture of a lack of support, lack of institutional support for the program, in terms of like bad facilities and not listening to requests for improvements, things like that. And, it is clear to me that neither side is telling the whole truth, or they're not, whether it's because they can't for legal reasons, I guess, I don't know. But I don't know if we're ever going to get the full story out of all this, unless it like actually gets for some reason taken to court for, I don't know what anyone would sue for, but unless this for some reason gets, ends up in a courtroom where they have to use discovery and then they have to, subpoena phone calls and text messages and emails and all this, we probably won't ever get the full story. But it's not a good situation. It's a bad look. At minimum, it's a bad look for Jamie Pollard, even if what he says is, mostly the truth, and that this was basically it coming down to, this was just it coming down to like too much infighting and too many inter-program conflicts that can't be resolved, that it's not worth the hassle anymore. The question I have then, because he said that the first problems arose in 2018. 2018 would have had a different coaching staff and a completely different roster. So why were there problems that happened in 2018 and problems that happened in 2023? Why were they both cited as reasons to shut down the program, 8 years after the original issues came up? I'm not saying something didn't happen in 2023 when the outside counsel was brought in and that didn't cause problems. I'm sure it did. And that may have just been the straw that broke the camel's back. But he was citing two different situations that happened with two completely different groups of people. And the only common denominator in that situation is Jamie Pollard / his staff that helps oversee the gymnastics program. So I'm curious as to why that was not addressed. The timeline doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for him to essentially lay blame at the feet of everybody in the gymnastics program when the gymnastics program was an entirely different group of people the first time these issues came up. And those weren't the first issues. People may forget back when Jamie Pollard first started, then coach KJ Kindler, I believe is their last name, who was a very, very good gymnast at Iowa State, was building the program up to, real like legit national relevance came to athletics asking for investment into facilities and things like that to help keep up with times and to help modernize, I would say, its gymnastics facilities. And that was denied, very much the same way that Cale Sanderson was not given money to, expand his wrestling program. And much like Cale Sanderson, KJ Kindler left for Oklahoma. If you know anything about collegiate gymnastics, you know Oklahoma is a blue blood in that sport. And it is because of KJ Kindler, who has won 7 national titles at Oklahoma as their head coach. So between gymnastics and wrestling, Iowa State has let go over a dozen national titles in 2 Olympic sports. And so when Jamie Pollard took over, the Iowa State gymnastics program was in a pretty good spot. They were nationally, pretty much they were a nationally relevant program. But in the course of Jamie Pollard's tenure, it went from a nationally relevant program to it is now literally dead. There's nothing left. And then today, the press release the release that the university put out to the fans today was that they are reimagining the women's sports lineup. Reimagining is a crazy word to use for we are cutting an entire program. This isn't we're going to shuffle things around because we just think this is the savvy thing to do. No, you blew up a gymnastics program because shit got bad. And apparently it seems like it was a failure at the feet of a lot of people to make this thing happen. But right now, Jamie Pollard has decided to lay all of the blame at the feet of the student athletes, the coaches, and the parents. So I'm not really sure what, like I said, I'm not sure what happened in 2023. I'm not sure what happened in 2018, but what I do know is that the gymnastics program has been on a slow decline for 2 decades now. And it has all happened under the watch of Jamie Pollard. I'm not saying it's all his fault, but it's not. Let's see. So Jamie Pollard took over in 2005. In 2004, Iowa State finished 14-4. And I believe they finished, they had 3 individual competitors at the NCAA championships. 2003 was a losing season, but then you go 2002, they were 14-9 and had some individual competitors. They did fairly well at the Big 12 championships. They were a decent program. Now you fast forward to 2025, they were 8-16. This year they were 2-11 before the season was canceled. 2024 they were 10-18. 2023 they were 8-10. 2022 they were 10-13. 2021 they were 10-8. That was the last winning season for Iowa State women's gymnastics. Shit got bad, and it happened under Jamie's watch because he apparently made multiple bad hires, and he is not taking any responsibility for that. And like I said, I don't know what happened in the last 2 incidents that he talked about that he cited. But what I do know is that there's more responsibility for Jamie Pollard to take on this than he is currently taking. I mean, he's taking 0 right now. He has laid all of the blame at the feet of everybody else and not taking any for himself for making what is apparently a horrific hire for the women's gymnastics coach and for letting this happen twice under 2 different coaches and under 2 different rosters. I hope we hear more about this. I hope we get more clarity about things that happened. My guess is that in order for there to be true clarity on this, for people to actually be able to get like a half decent story about what happened, my guess is that the athletes would have to admit to doing things that they are like, they would have to admit to things that they would not otherwise be like publicly proud of necessarily. I truly am just speculating here. Like the athletes, I think, would have been more specific about what happened if it was like something that they thought would make them only look good. And Jamie Pollard is partially choosing not to be specific because that's just kind of not what athletic directors do, I guess. You know, he's a public figure and they just didn't, you know, his video today he put was very media trained. He's not going to be, Jamie Pollard is only going to give you the brass tacks when it benefits him and when it makes him look good, unfortunately. So we're not going to get, I don't think we're going to get a full story about this, but I don't know. It's a frustrating situation. It sucks to see them cut a program. By nature, I'm a person that like I find change interesting. Like I'm not a person that is, you know, naturally scared of change. I find change and taking on new projects to be very, very interesting. So like I'm immediately tuned into what are they going to add? What's the thought process behind choosing what they're going to add? And all that, and you know, getting excited about a new sport. We haven't seen a new sport at Iowa State in a very, very long time. So you know, it's interesting to see. But it still sucks that you have a whole bunch of gymnasts that you know they signed up to be here. A lot of them moved from other places in the country. You know, they put their effort into wearing an Iowa State uniform and Iowa State, you know, singlet leads or whatever they call them. And it just didn't work out, and that sucks. But hey, it kind of is what it is. Time moves on. I think you know the people involved with the program now are going to they're going to feel bitter about it for a while. And I know in the video Jamie Pollard brought up, you know, the baseball program, the women, you know, the diving program and all this. They brought up and said like initially there was pain, but they eventually moved on. One, none of those sports were cut by Jamie Pollard. So like if they had beef, the baseball team could take, you know, issue with Bruce Vandeveld because he was the one that cut the baseball program, or, you know, the Gene Smith was the one that would have cut diving, I think maybe. Those players, like the baseball players, know that their sport was purely a casualty of Title IX. Like they know that it wasn't because there was like, it was a dysfunctional program or anything like that. Like it wasn't any of that. It was purely because of, for budgetary reasons due to Title IX compliance. They know that. So they know that it wasn't really Iowa State's decision. Like Iowa State didn't want to cut baseball. Like they weren't like, shit, you know, this program is not a national competitor, we should cut baseball. They weren't looking to do that. They just kind of had to do that because of Title IX. This I don't think is going to pan out the same way. Gymnastics didn't need to be cut to fulfill any sort of budgetary or regulatory, you know, requirement. It was done because the program was dysfunctional, and now the people that were involved with that program believe they were slighted. I would not, if I, you know, Jamie Pollard said like, you know, I hope in time that they can learn and they can come back and be proud of, you know, and reestablish a connection with the university and all this, whatever. Based on what I'm seeing today, I would not bet on it. I would not put a lot of money on many of the athletes or coaches that were involved in the program this year. I would not expect many of them to retain a positive relationship with the university. I don't think they're going to come back and be like, I don't think they'll be proud to come back and, you know, come to a football game or something like that. And you'll be honored at a football game. Like, I don't like if they brought back the 2017 gymnastics team for whatever reason, I don't know that you're going to get a lot of people that want to come back for that. Now, those, you know, the people on that team, didn't get screwed by this, but they probably know the people that did. And right now, pretty much everybody involved with the gymnastics program feels very harsh resentment towards specifically Jamie Pollard and the athletic department. I don't know about the university, but specifically, they feel major resentment right now, and they're pissed. I don't blame them. So I think Jamie's idea that eventually in time, these, the gymnasts and the coaching staff from this team will, they'll move on and they'll eventually have a positive relationship with the university. I think that's a pipe dream. And I honestly would not blame them one bit for holding resentment for a long time about this. I think eventually they'll move on, but like, I don't think you'll ever see them be like, oh man, like I don't think you're going to see them being publicly, reminiscent of their time at Iowa State, because I think they will pretty much forever probably hate the athletic department and maybe Jamie Pollard. So I don't know. It's a weird situation. It's a difficult situation. It doesn't look good for Iowa State athletics. It doesn't look good for Jamie Pollard. Even if he's truly not to blame in this, if he's truly not to blame, he could have done a much better job at not sounding like he was just shuffling blame to other people and throwing other people under the bus. So that's it. That's all I've got really to say on it right now. It's just a weird situation. But everybody, appreciate you for tuning in. I'm going to wrap it up for this week. I don't really want to talk about basketball anyways. It's just depressing. So appreciate everybody for tuning in and chiming in with their comments this week. I really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Enjoy the game on Saturday. We got the Big 12 tournament next week for basketball. Winner down in Big 12, down in Kansas City. They just got down there tonight. So hopefully get a good week out of them, get a good week out of the men. Hopefully a couple of tournament runs. We'll see if we go from there. So probably be back next week. Probably a basketball heavy show next week. Just once, because we'll have a better idea what the tournaments are going to look like and all that too. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all your comments, and we'll see you next week here on the Voice of College Football Network. Go Cyclones.